And now for something completely different. Hey Book Dragons, welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you could be here. Today I am discussing the second secret project from Brandon Sanderson, from the Kickstarter that he did. If you don't want to know the name of the secret project, if even that is too much for you, you may want to step away right now, because I am going to divulge the name of the book. This will be a spoiler-free review other than that, but if you don't want to know the name, time to step away. Also, if you could do me a favor, I am playing with some of my lighting for this video. I would greatly appreciate it if you would give me some feedback. Is the lighting good? Is it not so good? I'm trying to avoid a lot of post-editing on the brightness and coloring and things like that. So give me a heads up. Let me know how it looks, because I'm not going to edit the lighting on this, just so I can kind of get an idea from you all how it looks, okay? Please make sure to like, subscribe, join my Discord, and with all that being said, let's get right down to my review. This book is called The Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Surviving Medieval England. And that's quite a mouthful, and it feels very reminiscent to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I think that's intentional. In fact, I'm going to put on my spectacles here, and I'm going to read you exactly what I put down for the vibes that I got from this book as I read it. And so here we go. I put it down as a first-person sci-fi with vibes from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, crossed with Terry Pratchett, crossed with Doctor Who, crossed with Total Recall, crossed with Bourne Identity, crossed with Lit RPG, and crossed with Fortnite. And wow, guys, it's so true. All of those elements play a role in this, I think. Some of the biggest influences probably are The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's a big one. And Doctor Who, I think, probably influenced this quite a bit, because there is a significant element of time travel here. If you're familiar with Terry Pratchett and his absurdist humor found in the Discworld series, you'll feel right at home with this book as well. There's a big element of that there. There's a lot of pop culture references that pop up in the book in a humorous way, or in an attempt to be humorous. And of course, Total Recall and the Bourne Identity with memory loss. There is definitely a trope of amnesia in this book. So you've got a wide variety of tropes that are utilized in this book, and we'll talk about how well they work out, okay? But first, let's talk about the basic plot. And like I said before, none of this is spoilers. This is within the first few pages of the book. So the book is written from a first-person perspective. Our main character is the narrator of his story. He wakes up on the ground amidst remnants of a smoldering fire, wearing a cloak and blue jeans, with no memory of how he got here. All he has to go on, really, are a few random pages of a mysterious handbook called The Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Surviving Medieval England, created by a mysterious company known as Frugal Wizard, Inc. And throughout the course of the book, he has to survive in an unfamiliar world while trying to piece together his memories of what actually happened and how he actually got here. And he may or may not like what he finds out. Now, I won't go into too many details about the characters, but we do have your classic handful of characters like a wizard and a rogue and a priestess and gods and goddesses and an evil mastermind. So you've got all of those classic characters that figure into this story. The character development is pretty good. The characters are fun, and I feel like they're mostly well realized. There's no real subversion with the tropes I talked about before. They're basically just placed in the story for what value they bring to the story, and I felt like most of it worked well. The time travel elements were fairly interesting. The amnesia was well used. The absurdist humor was okay. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. But overall, I felt like the tropes were utilized well. And that kind of leads us into the prose of the book. One of the pros is, of course, the cleverness of it. It was a clever use of the tropes that were utilized, and it was also a fairly clever concept overall. Once you start to piece together the main character's backstory and figure out how he got here and who Frugal Wizard Inc. is and what this handbook is supposed to be, it's pretty clever. I thought it was fairly well done. And there was a cool use of nanotechnology as well. I won't go into many details, but nanotechnology is very heavily utilized in the way the character defends himself. And that's all I'm going to say. There are a few cons as well that I do want to talk about. I will say that overall it was somewhat predictable. As the story progressed, I could kind of see where things were going, and I called a few things early on before they actually happened. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I was right after all. And sometimes that bothers me. I don't like being able to predict everything in a book, but, it's okay. I'm spoiled by Agatha Christie because I can never predict her stuff, and this isn't Agatha Christie, of course. While the characters were mostly fun, they were kind of bland. Not really a whole lot of nuance to them. Just your standard average characters that you would find in almost any other book. And there's some rather cheesy things that happen in the book that are intended to be humorous, I think. But throughout the book, the character will give ratings to things, like star ratings. So at one point he gives a rating to a tree. He gave it a 2-star because it wasn't quite good enough at concealing him and things like that. It's like, okay, it's kind of silly, I think. I saw what he was trying to do with it. It just didn't totally mesh with the overall story. But it's okay. And there was also insta-love in the book, which I don't totally care for as it is, but in such a short book, it really kind of felt forced. Like, I didn't really feel that the story needed a love story between two of the characters. I just didn't feel like it was necessary. But, it is what it is. So if you'd like to know my overall rank for the book, I would say this is a shiny book. It's fine. It's fun. I enjoyed the story overall. This is not a Cosmere book, so I think Brandon does pretty well writing outside the Cosmere, but I haven't really read any other books except for one that can really give me a good way to determine whether or not that's true. But overall, I felt like this story was fun. It's definitely worth a read. I would not reread it. Honestly, I think it's definitely worth reading once. If you're a fan of Brandon Sanderson's writing, you won't find anything revolutionary or new here. You will likely enjoy the book because it is enjoyable. It's got your standard Sanderson flair. The prose is fine. It's very easy to read, very straightforward. The plot is very linear, even though it involves a time travel trope. There's not a lot of timey-wiminess involved in the story. It's pretty straightforward. So I definitely recommend that you read this book if you're interested in it. But at the end of the day, I've definitely read better books. I've read better books by Brandon Sanderson. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. What do you think? Have you read this book yet? I know it just came out recently, so you may or may not have had a chance to get to it. I started reading it the day it came out because I got it in my email. I did the ebook version, and I knocked it out within 3 or 4 days at most. And I'm glad I read it. It was a lot of fun. So if you have read it, let me know in the comments. If you have not, Does it sound like something that's up your alley that you want to read? Make sure that you are reading more books. I'll talk with you soon.